Welcome to this tutorial on responsive page design. I'm Peter Thompson. If you haven't already done so, watch the previous tutorials in this playlist. This tutorial aims to show how a template for a page can put together a variety of techniques for responsive design. We are developing for mobile first. And so what we see here is a single column of content for a mobile device or a narrow screen on the browser. The menu is initially hidden, but a button will display it or hide it again. If we make this page wider, it moves to a two-column layout with the menu now placed at the top. Wider again, and we move to a three-column layout with the menu on the left-hand side. Wider again, and we have the main content now split into two columns. Wider again, and the main content is now in three columns. If I make this wider still, you won't be able to see the menu as it's going off the screen. But now the main content is in four columns, and if I increase the width again, the main column content has gone to five columns, and note that the content is now flowing from the base of one column into the start of the next. Using this technique, there are no gaps in the content, you don't need to scroll down, and this makes full use of a wider screen. It's not simply presenting a narrow browser view in the middle of a screen, it's making full use of a widescreen layout. To help the reader follow the content through, we've automatically numbered each section. So 1, 2, and then into the next column 3, 4, and we've numbered the subsections as well. So this is section 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and so on. This helps the reader keep their place within text on the screen and makes it much more easy to read the content. So these are some of the techniques that we're going to explain in this tutorial. Now if we go back to the four-column layout, this is fine if we only have short amounts of text. So we can see here that the first main section and its subsections are easily visible. The same applies here and again here. But section 4 has much more text. And note what happens as we scroll down the page. We've simply created two columns, but here we have numbers 4.1 to 4.13, but in the second column it's 4.39 onwards. We'd need to scroll all the way down to the bottom of one column, 4.38, and then all the way back up to the top of the second column. So simply having two columns and splitting the text into two columns doesn't help the reader follow the text through. So the technique that we've used on the multiple columns is flowing text from one column to the next on the visible screen. This is much easier to use, but we may need to remind the user that they need to scroll to the right in order to see more of this text. This does make much better use of a wider screen. As we explained in the previous tutorial, the code for the menu starts with the Show Menu button, and we're using a checkbox as part of that. The menu code is an unordered list with links, and we style for the mobile device first. So the unordered list and the attributes of the list are set in this section first of all, and that produces a menu that is displayed and hidden on clicking or tapping a single button. 640 pixels, our media screen sets the menu button to display none, so that button is no longer visible. The menu is now displayed as a block, and we're calculating the width for each element in our list, floating them to the left so that they should all appear in one line along the top of the screen. If we hover, this is what we see if there are sub-items in the list. We've displayed our extra column on the right, and we've floated the content to the right. So here's the extra column on the right. Here is our menu along the top. The main content is still within a single column. The main content occupies a single column, continues to occupy a single column until we get to 1280 pixels, when it is split into two columns to make better use of the screen width. The code that creates this split into two columns is within a media query set to 1280 pixels, and the HTML code for this, we've set the background color to azure, margin of auto, which should center it, a width of 95% of its containing division, a column count of 2, so here are the two columns, a gap between these columns of 40 pixels, this is a gap down the middle between the columns, and a column rule. The column rule is this vertical line between the columns, and we've set this to be light blue, 1 pixel, and solid. This is a single main content item, another main content item, another main content item, and then we have this long section of text, which, as we said earlier, is not easy to read because you have to scroll all the way down one column and then scroll back up to the top of the next. So this is the basic 2-column layout. We could also create a 3-column layout here. Not all browsers, when I was writing this, followed the HTML code for this, and so we needed a WebKit code section in order to get other browsers to use the same concept. Next, we will look at our multiple column content, where the text flows in each column to the base of the viewable page, and then into the next column, and then the next column, so that we don't need to scroll down the page to see the end of one column, back up the page to see the start of the next column. We can scroll right to see all the columns, and this makes the maximum use of larger screens and desktop computers. Let us look at the HTML code to remind ourselves of the structure of this content. all the content sits within a main division called class is main content, and within that a division with the class of a column box. So this contains all our scrolling column filling content. If we look at the style sheet for this, I set this using a media query and a minimum width of 1650 pixels. If your screen is narrower than this, you will need to edit this to a smaller size in order to see this in action. The main content is set to occupy 69% of the width of the screen, and the two sidebars, one with the menu and one the right sidebar, occupy the rest. The column box is where all this placing of content happens. Its position is set to be absolute. But note that this is an absolute position within its parent div. So although it is absolute, it is also responsive, moving as its parent div moves. We've set a top of 5 pixels, a bottom of 5 pixels, so that this remains within the visible screen, and the width of 100% of its containing div. The height is set to be 90 VH. So this is 90% of the vertical height of the parent div. The overflow is auto, the margin is auto. Our column rule, we've given a color, a pixel width, and an outset to set its position. And you can see the column rule here. Again, having a column rule like this helps the user to read the content and keep track of their position. Column width of 20M. We're also setting a gap of 1M between the columns. And as before, WebKit rules for those browsers that don't use the HTML5 version of this code. Because these columns are being set as absolute, they always remain within the browser's view. And as they flow from one into the next, we can read the whole of a column on the screen, and we can see here item 436, item 437. This makes it much more usable and easy to read